Okay, let's unpack this. You know that incredibly frustrating feeling when you wake up from a wildly vivid dream, like an emotionally overwhelming dream.
Oh, yeah. The ones where your heart is literally racing when you open your eyes.
Exactly. And you're sitting up in bed, the images are so crisp in your mind, and you immediately try to explain it to someone. You open your mouth and say something, incredibly articulate, like, well, I was at my high school, but the school was also a submarine, and my accountant was there, but he was a flock of pigeons.
Right, and the person just stares at you.
Yeah. The moment those words hit the air, the magic just evaporates. The profound terror or joy you felt a second ago suddenly sounds like a ridiculous cartoon.
Well, I mean, the emotional weight rarely survives that journey into waking language.
Hmm.
Our everyday vocabulary, it evolved to describe the physics of the waking world, right? Gravity, linear time, logical cause and effect.
The boring stuff.
Exactly. So when you try to force the disjointed, sort of multi-dimensional reality of the unconscious mind through that really narrow linguistic filter, the translation inevitably falls flat.
But today, we are looking at a stack of sources that completely flips that translation problem on its head. We are taking a deep dive into a frankly rule-breaking literary innovation by Abbas Muhammad Amara.
It's really fascinating work.
It is, because he isn't just trying to, describe dreams better. He's developed a rigorous technique for transforming the chaotic world of the subconscious directly into haiku.
Which, and we really can overstate this, represents a monumental shift in literary theory,
Hmm.
because traditional haiku is deeply, fundamentally rooted in waking reality.
Right. It's all about nature in the present moment.
Yes, it is the art of acute, objective observation. It demands the poet focus entirely on the physical world, the dewdrop on a leaf, the sound of a frog jumping into a pond. But Amara's technique acts as a bridge. It merges the limitless parallel world of the unconscious mind with an intensely condensed, disciplined, poetic form.
And the mission here isn't just about recording your weird dreams like a teenager's diary entry. It's about turning those subconscious experiences into living, breathing, poetic canvases. The goal is to make the reader feel like they're stepping inside the dream itself.
Experiencing that collapse of time and space firsthand.
Exactly. But before we can really understand how Amara's modern technique accomplishes this, we actually need to rewind. We need to look at how viewing poetry through the lens of dreams completely rewrites our understanding of history, specifically regarding the most famous haiku master who ever lived.
Matsuo Basho. I mean, anyone who has even brushed past the subject of haiku knows Basho.
Oh, for sure.
He is the towering, defining figure of 17th century Japanese poetry. He essentially codified the aesthetic we associate with the form today.
Right. So we have to talk about his absolute masterpiece, a poem called Summer Grasses. I'm going to read the traditional English translation of this piece. It goes like this. Summer grasses, all that remains of warriors' dreams.
It's beautiful.
It's incredibly melancholic.
Yeah. And for centuries, literary critics and scholars globally have read that specific word dreams purely as a metaphor.
Like dreams of glory, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They interpreted the poem as a sweeping philosophical reflection on lost ambitions, dashed hopes, and the fleeting nature of human glory. The established narrative is that these great historical samurai fought and died on this battlefield for power. And centuries later, all their grand worldly dreams amount to nothing more than weeds blowing in the summer wind.
It's the classic Ozymandias interpretation, like, look upon my works, ye matey, and despair, because it's all just grass now.
Very philosophical, very detached.
Right. But here is the revelation hidden in our sources today. There is this fascinating research by Fukasawa Shinji from Nippon.com that completely shatters that centuries-old consensus. Shinji argues that Basho wasn't using a metaphor at all.
This completely blew my mind when I read it.
Same. He wasn't standing on a hill being deeply philosophical about the ambitions of dead men. Basho had actually visited Takadate, this famous historical battleground. He got tired, sat down, fell asleep, and had a literal dream about the historical warriors Yoshitsune and Benkai recounting their final bloody battles.
He was unconscious. He was having a vivid, literal nightmare about the ghosts of history playing out their final moments right in his own mind.
Yes. Then he wakes up, probably startled, his heart pounding, looks around, and what does he actually see in the waking world? Nothing but summer grasses. The phantom warriors are gone, the visceral blood and steel of the dream are gone, just the grass.
Which completely changes the translation and the fundamental intent of the poem.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. Shinji provides a new, literal reading based on this historical context. It translates much more accurately to summer grasses, all that remains of a dream about warriors.
That is just wild to me. It's like staring at a famous abstract painting your entire life. Something you thought was a masterclass in representing pure, formless emotion, and suddenly realizing it's actually a photorealistic portrait of a bizarre, real-world event.
That's a great way to put it.
It shifts the entire foundation of how we view classic haiku. I mean, we've spent hundreds of years thinking Basho was delivering this grand, sweeping metaphor about human hubris, when in reality, he was just jotting down a really intense nap he had.
And it grounds the poem in a deeply personal psychological experience rather than a detached philosophical one.
Yeah.
It proves that the subconscious has always been knocking on the door of this art form, even if the academic critics completely missed the cue.
They totally missed it.
But leaning into that realization highlights a massive contradiction.
Which brings us to the core paradox of what Amara is trying to formalize today. Like, if a master like Basho is casually inspired by a real dream centuries ago, why is Amara's formalization of this into a specific technique considered so revolutionary now?
It's a good question.
It really comes down to a fundamental clash of mediums, right?
Yeah, let's look at the two elements being forced together here. On one side, cognitive psychology tells us that dreams are inherently chaotic. They're completely illogical, deeply subjective, and totally free from the chains of daily logic.
Oh, absolutely.
They operate on a completely different physical and temporal plane, where the laws of thermodynamics simply do not apply.
Right, you open your kitchen pantry and suddenly you're walking through a sprawling desert. That is dream logic. There is no causality.
On the other side of the equation, you have haiku. As a poetic form, haiku is famously strict. It has a rigid structural cadence. It traditionally requires a kigo, or a specific seasonal reference. And most importantly, it is laser-focused on observing the realistic here and now.
The present moment.
Yes, it is considered the ultimate literary expression of objective, waking mindfulness.
It's supposed to be an egoless snapshot of nature. You aren't supposed to inject your personal chaos into it. So mashing these two things together feels like trying to mix oil and water. You're taking the most chaotic, unrestrained human experience and trying to clam it into the most disciplined, rule-bound box in all of literature.
What's fascinating here is how Amara reconciles this. He doesn't view it as a destructive collision. He sees it as a necessary fusion. The dream world doesn't destroy the haiku. It adds a much-needed layer of boundless imagination to it.
Okay.
It turns a paradox into a creative integration. By using the incredibly strict, focused lens of the haiku to view the boundless, infinite world of the dream, it gives the poem an entirely new aesthetic horizon.
But wait, I have to push back on this. If you remove the strict adherence to observable reality and the laws of nature, if I can suddenly write a haiku about a flying golden retriever or a melting clock, aren't you just writing tiny fantasy poems?
Ah, I see what you're saying.
Like, does it even stay a haiku at that point? If the defining characteristic of haiku is grounded realism, and you remove the realism, aren't we just writing microfiction?
That is the exact tension literary purists point out. But Amara argues that it absolutely remains haiku because it preserves the intense, concentrated poetic mold. The soul of a haiku isn't just that it describes a tree or a frog.
What is it then?
The soul is the brevity. It's the sudden juxtaposition of images, the negative space left for the reader to fill in the gaps. By applying that strict minimalist mold to a dream, you aren't writing a fantasy novel. You are capturing a fleeting, authentic moment of human experience. You are just freeing the poet's soul from physical limitations.
Wow.
The here and now just happens to be taking place inside the architecture of the poet's mind.
Okay, I see the distinction. The discipline isn't necessarily in what you are observing. It's in how tightly and sharply you observe it. You can rigorously observe a hallucination. So, how does one actually structure a dream without losing that haiku feel? Amara doesn't just say, hey, write about your weird dreams. He has actually formalized a toolkit. If the physical boundaries of the waking world are gone, what keeps the poem grounded? Do these poems even have to take place chronologically?
Well, the framework Amara outlines completely abandons waking chronology and physics, but replaces them with dream logic. Two of the key features he identifies are the collapsing of physical boundaries and time travel.
Time travel.
Yeah. In a dream haiku, you are explicitly permitted to describe impossible movements. Things can occupy the same physical space at the same time. And regarding time, a dream haiku freely links the past, present, and future into a single moment.
Oh, that makes sense.
You can have an observation where a childhood memory is happening simultaneously with a futuristic anxiety.
Because in a dream, you never question why there is a medieval castle sitting in your office parking lot. It's just accepted as fact.
Exactly. The unconscious mind doesn't demand seeing the construction permits for that castle.
Yeah.
Another crucial element of this toolkit involves redefining how we use metaphor, specifically through unforced personification. In traditional waking poetry, if a poet gives a tree human emotion, say, saying the willow is weeping out of sadness, it can sometimes feel forced or overly sentimental.
It's a conscious literary device. It
Right.
feels like the poet is trying a bit too hard to make a point.
But in a dream state, nature naturally possesses human traits. It interacts with human emotions seamlessly. A crying sky or an angry, vengeful mountain isn't a metaphor in a dream. It is a literal fact of that environment.
The mountain is actually angry at you.
Exactly.
I love that concept. You don't have to work to make the metaphor land for the reader because your subconscious already built the emotional reality for you. The fear is real, even if the mountain isn't.
Yeah, the emotion is the anchor.
What about the content of the dreams themselves? Are we just talking about surreal landscapes, or is there a deeper psychological layer Amara wants poets to tap into?
Well, Amara emphasizes psychological depth and intertextuality. These poems shouldn't just be random collections of weird images. They need to reflect hidden, deep-seated fears and desires. They are the raw language of the subconscious.
And the intertextuality part.
Through intertextuality, the poet often naturally remakes famous historical or literary myths. Your personal dream might borrow heavily from the collective mythology of your culture. Ancient floods, falling from great heights, being chased by shadowy figures.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. The text mentions a feature called manipulating senses, which is essentially synesthesia. It's the phenomenon where you might hear a color or taste a sound.
Right, the cross-wiring of the senses.
Yeah. And if we think about traditional haiku as an acoustic guitar, it's beautiful, it's natural, it's strictly bound by the acoustic physics of wood and string. Amara's technique is like handing that classical acoustic musician a wild modular electronic synthesizer.
I like that analogy.
The notes they're playing, the actual haiku structure, are exactly the same. But suddenly, you can distort the signal. You can make the output do things that completely defy working physics.
You are playing the same fundamental scale, but the instrument has been modified to output impossible frequencies. The form remains, but the sensory experience is entirely alien.
Okay, the synthesizer analogy makes sense in theory, but what does a distorted frequency actually look like on the page? Can we look at Amara's actual work to see this toolkit in action?
Yes, let's do that. The text provides several vivid translations of Amar's own work using this exact method. Let's start with a very grounded one titled The Alarm Clock. It reads, "Phone alarm, I hold banknotes scattering in the air."
Wow, that is incredibly visceral. You're holding on to wealth or security in your dream, and then reality literally rings and the money vanishes.
The psychological layer there is brilliant. It's the sudden, violent jolt of reality interrupting a deep subconscious desire. The physical boundary of the dream collapses the exact moment the acoustic alarm sounds in the waking world, and the dream money disintegrates into the waking air.
It captures the precise microsecond of loss.
Exactly.
Here's another one that utilizes that surreal contrast. This one is titled The Hospital. General anesthesia, I dance with butterflies in the hospital garden.
The stark contrast in those 3 lines is staggering. You have the cold, clinical, objectively terrifying reality of a hospital room and impending surgery. That is the physical anchor.
Right, the reality.
But the mind's escape mechanism, induced by the chemical anesthesia, creates this intensely surreal, beautiful counter-narrative. The haiku holds both the terror of the physical world and the euphoric liberation of the unconscious world simultaneously.
It's beautiful, but it carries this heavy, haunting undertone because you know the butterflies are a lie to protect the brain from the surgery.
Yeah, it's a very fragile beauty.
Speaking of the brain protecting itself, going back to our synthesizer analogy, the mixing of senses, there is a perfect example of synesthesia in the text. It's simply titled Synesthesia. It goes, waking up with coffee flavor rooster crowing. I absolutely love the mechanics of this one. You are literally tasting a sound.
The sound of the rooster and the taste of the morning coffee are compressed so tightly in the confusing transition between sleep and waking that the brain literally crosses the wires. The auditory input becomes an olfactory and gustatory experience.
So cool. Let's look at how he handles the concept of time travel we discussed earlier. There's one titled Time Distortion. Deep sleep talking to my grandson who isn't born yet.
In waking life, that observation is a physical impossibility. But in the architecture of a dream, it carries profound emotional weight. The subconscious love or anxiety for a future generation is so overwhelmingly strong that it actually summons them into the present moment. The future collapses into the now.
And Amara doesn't shy away from the deeply surreal and historical elements either. He has these flashes of intense, almost biblical imagery.
Right, the intertextuality.
Yeah, like he writes about trying to paint a picture with Sinbad the Sailor, but failing because the mechanical sound of wheels wakes him up. He describes a nightmare landscape of a sky of iron over oil fields. He references the ancient story of Joseph with 11 stars kneeling. There is even this deeply unsettling, fragmented image, the father turning toward the gleam of a blade.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, looking at all these examples together, a very clear, deliberate pattern emerges in Amara's work. Consider where almost all of these specific poems take place in the timeline of sleep.
Well, they don't seem to happen in the middle of deep REM sleep. They all happen right at the very end.
Yes, they exist entirely on the threshold. Many of these poems capture the exact, fleeting, often violently jarring moment where the dream world collides with the physical world.
Like the phone alarm ringing.
Or the sound of wheels, slipping into the dark abyss of your bedroom just seconds before your eyes snap open. Amara isn't just writing about the passive experience of deep sleep. He is specifically documenting the friction of the borderland between realities.
It's that jarring re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. You're burning up on your way back to waking reality, and the haiku is the spark that flies off the heat shield.
I love that.
So what does this all mean? Why did Amara write a whole theoretical framework for this? Why should a listener who maybe just casually enjoys poetry care about this new approach to an ancient form?
Amara's final thesis is wildly ambitious. The ultimate goal is to liberate haiku from its traditional, rigid geographical and seasonal constraints without losing its simplicity and its emotional power.
To sort of democratize it.
Exactly. By formalizing this toolkit, he is offering an open invitation to poets everywhere. He believes this technique can make haiku a truly universal, cross-cultural art form. Dreams are the ultimate common denominator.
That's so true.
Every human on Earth dreams, regardless of their native landscape, their language, or the season outside their window.
You don't need to know the specific Japanese word for cherry blossoms to universally understand the visceral, stomach-dropping feeling of falling in a dream.
Furthermore, Amara suggests that this isn't just an exercise for art's sake. He argues that this technique provides a fascinating new tool for the scientific and psychological study of dreams.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, by forcing the chaotic, sprawling narrative of the subconscious into a hyper-condensed, three-line format, we might actually be able to distill and categorize the core emotional truths of our dreams in a way that rambling 10-page dream journals simply can't achieve.
Ah, I see. A dream journal lets you ramble about the submarine and the pigeons. A haiku forces you to find the absolute emotional center of the dream immediately. It's like panning for gold. You wash away all the absurd narrative dirt until you are left with just the heavy, shining nugget of pure feeling.
And that nugget is the poem. It's a remarkable synthesis of ancient poetic discipline and modern psychological awareness.
It really is, and it completely reframes how I think about the wasted creative potential of sleep. Which brings me to this final thought for you, the listener. The next time you wake up abruptly from a bizarre logical dream and reach for your phone, what if, instead of scrolling, you tried to capture that exact surreal feeling in just 3 short lines? Could your chaotic subconscious hold the ultimate, perfectly distilled poem just waiting to be translated?